Not too long ago, shockwaves were felt through the entertainment industry as Bob Iger returned triumphantly to replace Bob Chapek after Disney's woes continued after the COVID bounce back or expected bounce back, whatever it was. Everything shut down for COVID, everything got bad, and Bob Iger was supposed to come back and turn the company around, and that has not happened. And they are actually signing up for 2 more years of Bob Iger hell for the Disney Corporation. And honestly, there's really nothing else that they could do at this point. What are they going to do? Go replace him with Bob Chapek? He already fired that guy, and they already, had basically a coup at the company to bring Bob Iger back in. And the weird thing is most of what Bob Chapek was doing that was ineffective at Disney, whether it be with their movie strategy, their Disney Plus strategy, their traditional television strategies, their theme parks and all that stuff, was all implemented by Bob Iger himself. He just upped the ante in a couple of cases. Although I will say this, I do believe the rising theme park prices is a Bob Chapek thing rather than a Bob Iger initiative, although he was also raising prices before he left the first time. But there's really nothing else that they can do. They have to ride this out with Bob Iger and see if he still has the magic touch to turn the company around. And I do believe Bob Iger is going to learn that age-old lesson that everyone becomes the villain in their own story if they stick around long enough, because he's definitely the villain at Disney right now because they have turned their backs on their primary core audiences, basically families, worldwide families. It has not worked out. And yes, we have talked about the dwindling returns for movies and actually the skyrocketing losses based on their movie properties, whether it just be a Disney movie, a Pixar movie, a Lucasfilm movie, or an MCU movie. They're all losing money right now, but things are much worse than that. First, let's talk about the big news that we learned in the last 24 hours. Bob Iger will remain at the helm of Walt Disney Company through 2026, fulfilling a prediction from many in the industry that he would not step down as CEO at the end of next year as originally planned. From the moment Iger returned, Disney watchers were expecting the news that his tenure would be extended. Disney at present is dealing with a host of internal issues, in addition to the urgency to reinvent its linear TV businesses for the streaming era. And that's the big deal, right? They got to get into streaming. Everyone's got to get into streaming. Everyone needs to have their own streaming service to compete with Netflix, rather than just creating their own movies and television shows and selling them to Netflix, which was actually quite profitable for Disney back in the day. But they decided they were going to become a streaming company and also change the entire culture of their company at the exact same time. All the things that are playing out aren't Bob Chapek's fault. Really, they're Bob Iger's fault. He decided that Disney as a brand needed to be more inclusive because, Disney's just been so associated with like racism over the last 10, 20 years, just so associated with excluding people based on their race, religion, gender, sexuality, and all that stuff. Disney just wasn't an inclusive company, and they decided to go all in on the ESG initiatives, get that good score, right? Because you get that good government kickback or whatever. I'm going to do a video on that somewhat soon. It has turned out to be a very negative strategy for the company. Not only can you see that in the consumer confidence of the brand, not only can you see it in the box office receipts and just the dwindling confidence that Disney can even produce anything good these days. Disney has been awash in losses for the past few years as it invested big in direct-to-consumer streaming platforms, Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. The softening of the global streaming marketplace over the past few years has forced Disney and other Hollywood content giants to rethink the gung-ho pivot, even as cord-cutting takes its toll on legacy linear networks like ESPN and Disney Channel that have churned out profits for the Mouse House. Disney's recent travails have been reflected in its stock market price, which was approaching $190 in early 2021, but has traded under $100 since March. For the year to date, Disney shares are down 14%, closing Wednesday at $90.15. So they are down well over 50% over the past 3 or 4 years. Obviously, Bob Iger was in charge when all the good times were rolling and they had $1 billion grossing films at the time, and things just haven't gone as well since. Yes, they did decide to go all in on Disney Plus at the same time that obviously we had the Peacock come online, Paramount Plus. What are their names? Is it Paramount Network? Whatever the Paramount one is, I don't even get that one. Obviously, HBO Max is now a competitor. Certainly, Amazon Prime got there a little bit earlier, but Netflix is the big company that's out there. And I don't understand how Disney or any other company didn't see this coming. If you look at Netflix as a company, over the years, they have enormous amounts of debt in comparison to their onboard cash. In fact, a lot of times they don't really even have any cash because the only way to grow as a streaming platform is to offer loads and loads of new content to entice new subscribers to jump onto the platform. That's one of the reasons that Disney Plus is flatlined over the last 12 months or so, because there's been a de-emphasis on creating and adding new attractions through Disney Plus. And also they've been removing a lot of content on there that people just weren't watching. And that has led to a stalled growth for Disney Plus itself. But of course they were going to lose so much money. If you just look at the business model from Netflix, the market leader themselves, it is absolutely to lose truckloads of money for years on end, years and years on end. They don't even know when Netflix is really going to be a profitable company at this point, and they've been doing this for like 20 years. Obviously, Disney jumping into the fray wasn't very smart. They probably could have just kept producing their television shows for the Disney Channel and other networks and stuff like that. It's not like Disney was just creating shows for Disney. They were going out there and producing lots of shows and obviously lots of movies. And then you sell the rights to distribute them on streaming to Netflix or Amazon Prime or Max or whatever for 6 months at a time. Or, hey, you want the Star Wars library? Yeah, that's going to cost you $4 billion for 2 years. Well, that actually makes a whole lot of money, and you aren't generating any new content. There are no costs involved with that other than like lawyer fees and stuff like this. I have no idea why anybody in entertainment decided that there needed to be 15 competing streamers all at the same time. Not to mention the fact that they're not just competing with Netflix, they're not just competing with Hulu, which they own, I guess, not just competing with Amazon Prime. You're competing with YouTube. I can tell you this right now. I have Disney Plus in my house. You know, I do have 3 little kids, and there is a lot of content from back in the day that I would like to enjoy watching with them. You know what they watch? For the most part, they watch YouTube. That's what kids watch nowadays. It's so interactive and easy for them to find the stuff that they want, or a lot of times for them to find the stuff that I don't want them to find. Not like adult content, but there's just some videos on YouTube. Like, you can't be watching this, you end up having to block out the channel or whatever. So they're competing with all these companies and all these platforms that are already intrinsically in the conscience of the consumers that they're out there looking for. And they put themselves behind an enormous 8 ball because they ended up destroying a bunch of their brands in the process. I don't think the reason the MCU is a shell of its former self is per se like all the characters are bad. There's some good stuff out there. There's some characters worth revisiting or whatever, but there's just so much of it. Like, how many Disney Plus shows do we need to have that actually tie into the MCU itself? Why didn't they just create their own shared Marvel universe on Disney Plus that had a different flavor? Kind of like Netflix's Daredevil, a universe that they were doing. Or like, you had the CW Arrowverse, which felt completely different from the DCEU and was successful in its own right sometimes, depending on the show, mostly for the first 3 years or whatever. And obviously they just wore out Star Wars already, and they're wearing out all these other brands they have. And Disney Plus has been an enormous mistake on their part. They could have been making money hand over the fist for the last 5 years, just selling the rights to the content that they have, rather than spending billions upon billions of dollars creating new content that no one wanted in the first place. It's absolutely stupid, but it doesn't stop there. Under Bob Iger, succeeding Bob Chapek, things have gotten much worse at the theme parks as well. Walt Disney World and Disneyland have seen significantly shorter wait times to get on rides, a sign that visitors are staying away this summer as the Mouse House struggles to attract guests, apparently put off by their exorbitant ticket prices, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The thinning traffic is bad news for the entertainment giant, which is in the midst of a $5.5 billion cost-cutting spree that has resulted in layoffs across its divisions, including sports cable empire ESPN. Travel agents and industry analysts say the combination of high theme park ticket prices, Florida's sweltering summer heat, and the allure of visiting Europe and other foreign destinations could explain the downturn in foot traffic at the Mouse House. And yes, I imagine a lot of that stuff does figure into it. Once you start upping ticket prices and it no longer seems like a good value proposition, people aren't going to want to go down there. A lot of times when you go to Disney World or Disneyland or whatever, do you actually plan that stuff out like 6 months in advance, a year in advance? Florida's sweltering heat probably keeps the locals out, but certainly doesn't keep people that were planning to go down there. Families aren't going to Disneyland because Disney ruined their brand. It's no longer a destination for just every generic family in the world. It's something that they wanted to do. You want to go to Disney World. I remember when they announced that, they acquired Lucasfilm and they were going to set up the Jedi Academy. There's nothing in this world that I wanted more at the time than to go to the Jedi Academy with my 8-year-old. Just him and me having fun, sending the wife off, go find your own stuff to do. This is boys' time and we're going to have a good time. I don't even want to do that anymore. They've ruined Star Wars so bad it's not even funny. And let's not mention what they've done to ESPN. I used to watch ESPN every single day of my life. I would watch SportsCenter at least a 30-minute prime time one once a day. Normally, I would watch SportsCenter a couple of times a day. I would watch the live sporting events, and I would watch a lot of their original programming as well, including like their debate shows and stuff like that. And then one day I'm watching SportsCenter, and it's not sports highlights anymore. It's not sports analysis anymore. It was like really sad music with some dude with like a really low voice talking about these like heartwarming stories for women. I was like, what is this? This is an ESPN. They ruined that brand too. Everything Disney touches, they ruin because they basically turn everything into a princess brand, right? Disney is the world of princesses. That's the reason they acquired Marvel Comics to begin with. They wanted a boys brand that they could go out there and promote like the Disney princess brand, but actually specifically for boys. They went and took that, and yeah, it was great all the way up through Endgame. There were a couple of hiccups here and there, and then they decided to turn that one into a princess brand as well. They go out there and acquire the worldwide leader in sports, ESPN. You got ESPN basically everywhere in the world, solely based on sports analysis, sports coverage, live sports events, basically for men for the most part. And they made it a girls brand for some reason, like every single thing. Star Wars, yeah, let's replace all the male heroes with female heroes and show why those male heroes were always flawed in the first place. And it's like, you can only take so much of this. And it's all been happening under the direction of Bob Iger. Like I said, Bob Chapek didn't come up with these ideas on his own. He was just continuing on with what Bob Iger was doing before he left the first time. And Bob Iger is just continuing along with this plan this next time that he's taken over. And nothing is changing. Nothing is getting better. And the divide between Disney and their core audience, the family, gets bigger and bigger every single day because Disney can't admit, Bob Iger can't admit, that they were wrong, that they took their actual consumers for granted, and they decided to destroy something beautiful so they could say they were a progressive company and up their ESG score. Nothing about this really makes sense whatsoever, and you can certainly see it in the box office. This has been probably the worst year in Disney in like over 20 years. There was a time when Disney wasn't doing all that well. Well, we're getting back to that time. I've actually broke it all down why 2023 has been an absolute nightmare for Disney at the box office, whether it be Lucasfilm, Disney, Pixar, or the MCU. There's also a link in the video description.